Hey YouTube. So the reason why I'm making this video right now is because I just completed building my game table, and let me give you a little backstory. Recently, I've kind of gotten away from my Xbox, and I've kind of rekindled the love for board games. Classic tabletop board games, and my collection has grown quite a bit. Actually, the closet behind me is now full of board games, and and there's a board game in my trunk my girlfriend doesn't know about. Shh, don't tell her. So yeah, so what I did is I watched a couple videos, put all their ideas together, and then I just designed. I just drew it out, rough draft. I bought the lumber, and off we went. And the rest of the video, I'm just going to throw up pictures that I took while I made the table, instead of bringing my camera out to the garage and just recording me working, which is very boring. I can just speed it along if I show you some pictures, and then I'll talk about each picture and what I did and the materials that I got. So if you want to do this, I definitely think anyone can do this because I am not a carpenter. I don't work with wood regularly. I I've never stained before. This is my first time staining. I've never used polyurethane or anything like that. Um, hmm. There's a lot of first in this table, and I really enjoyed working on it. And like I said, I'm not a carpenter. I don't regularly build things, so that means if I can do it, you can do it. All right, all you got to do is try. And any mistakes in the table, it's just character. That's just character of your table. If it's a large mistake, you might have to go back to the store and get a little more wood. But you learned from the first one, so you won't do it again in the second one. Um, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and definitely leave some comments on what you think, and if you guys need a little more information, if I missed anything, let me know. Okay, so we're gonna kick this off. The first picture here, um, you can see that I went to the hardware store and I bought a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and then I used my miter saw, which is very handy. I cut down the 2x4s to make a border for the plywood. Now I cut my plywood down to 3x5, so that way when I add the 1x6s and the 1x8s later on the outside, you'll see that later. When I add those in, then it becomes a 4x6 table. So the play area is only a 3x5, which is plenty big enough for me. So that's the first picture. Actually, I don't have a table. Like I said, I'm not a carpenter, so I don't have a table. What I did have is some fake fire pits, and that's what you see me working on there with the little wheels and the holes and stuff. But yeah, so I just cut down the wood and I put it around the table. I didn't 45 any of the corners or anything like that because this is going to be on the underside of the table, and it doesn't need to look pretty, or it doesn't need to look pretty because it's no one's ever going to see it. So let's go to the next. The next picture is of the 2x4s, and they are all together there, and I screwed them together, 2 screws per corner, with I believe 2.5-inch screws. I use drywall screws because I like them. You can use whatever you want, but I like that. Okay, so what I have done now is I have flipped it right side, and I'm going to screw more of the screws
into the 2x4s just to secure it a little more than it already is, and to make sure everything looks right on that end. Alright, the next picture is of me putting the first two 1x8s on the short end table, and then I'll be attaching 1x8s on the longer ends as well, and that'll create the play area. And right there, it's 4 inches, and then 4 inches of play area. So, depending on how deep you want your game table, depends on this step right here. If you follow my design. Let's go to the next picture. Okay, the next picture, what I did after I got all the 1x8s screwed into the 2x4s, I flipped it back over on its head there, and that's my buddy. He's helping me screw in the 2x4 supports that will be holding the second set of 1x8s and creating the outside. So I used just 2x4s with 2 screws screwed in with 4-inch drywall screws through the 2x4, the 1x8, and into the little 2x4s there. I cut the 2x4 supports that you see my buddy screwing in right now. I cut those to 4.25 inches, just to make sure that I have a lip for my toppers later on. If I just did 4 inches, that would cover up everything, and I wanted that little lip. So when I put the toppers on for my dining room table, they would have a rail to rest on. So that's why I did. Okay, so next picture. Alright, so the next picture is of all the supports screwed on, and that's what it looks like. And let's see here. In this picture, you can see that I attached the 1x8 on the outside of the 2x4 supports, and that makes the outside of the table. This is the side that people will see when they sit around the table or walk by it or whatever. And I'm going to do that all the way around the table. I cut this wood with my miter saw. Now my miter saw only cuts about 5 or 6 inches, so it doesn't go all the way through. So what you'll have to do is make your first cut, flip it around, and then finish your cut. Sometimes it doesn't cut straight this way. Just watch what you're doing and you'll be okay. Okay, so in this picture, you can see that I went all the way around the table, and I even cut out the 1x6 tops. That'll be the rail, or where people put their hands and stuff. I cut those out too, and I cut those at a 45. The 1x8s I also did cut at a 45 because I do want it. I want it to look a little pretty there and nice looking. Now remember to make sure all your corners are square, because if they're not, this will be very difficult to do, this step right here. Okay, but everything looked good, so I continued on. Now that the 1x8s are attached to the 2x4s and everything looks good, I'm going to place my 1x6s on top of the 1x8s, and it'll start looking more like the table I have today. Alright, and so these are actually not screwed on. The 1x6s are not screwed on, they're not glued on yet. I just wanted to cut them and place them just to see how it would look, because we still have a few more steps to do. And one of those steps is to cut out the holes for the cup holders. So I did that with my hammer drill, and I used, I believe, a 3-inch hole saw. And That worked perfectly for my cup holders. Depending on the size of your cup holder, depends on how big a hole you have to cut, obviously. But that's what I used there. And after I made my cut, I put the boards back just to make sure that the hole falls into the gap, because if it doesn't, then you have issues. And I also added a 2x4 in each of the corners, and I air nailed those on just to give the table greater support in the corners. I did glue the 1x8s, the outer 1x8s, to the 2x4s, and then air nailed them, just to make sure. But you know, the corners, I was a little worried maybe they would not hold together, but the 2x4s, they do help. So I would strongly suggest putting 2x4s or some sort of support in each of the corners as well. But yeah, all my cup holders lined up in the negative space between the 1x8s, so I continued on. This is the glue I used. It was able to be sanded and stained, so that's important. That's an important thing when you're using this, or if you're gonna build this by yourself or whatever. Make sure you can sand it and stain it. So there I am. I'm going to glue down and air nail the 1x6s onto the tops. What I did was, all the way around the table, I just put a single bead line of glue wherever the board would touch, and then I placed the board on top. When it was where I wanted it to be, I just air nailed it down, and everything was good to go. So after I'm done air nailing everything and everything looks good and secure, then I went around with my filler, with my wood filler, and I filled in all the holes from the air nailer and any cracks that were in the wood that I want to cover up. Now remember, with the wood filler, it does have to be sandable and stainable as well. If it's not, then it'll pop out and just be an eyesore for later on when you stain. So remember that. Remember to get sandable and stainable wood filler. Alright, so after that, I just wanted to let it dry for a little bit, so I went on to my felt layer. And what I did was, I got a thinner piece of plywood, and it was pretty cheap, about 20 bucks. I had them cut it down to a 3x5 again, and then I took it home and cut it down just a hair more so it would fit into the play area. You'll need a staple gun with staples, of course, pair of scissors. I used Loctite adhesive spray just to make sure it would hold, and a hammer just in case your staples don't go all the way into the plywood. You can help them out. In something called batting. It's a nice fabric. I did this just so the fabric had a little more cushion. If I'm rolling dice or whatever, then the dice have a little more cushion. I mean, you don't have to do this, but it turned out really nice in the end. So after the batting is on, then I unfolded my premium felt. Lower grade felts aren't as good, and they don't last as long, so if you're gonna go with felt, I would definitely strongly suggest getting premium felt, and that'll last a little longer there for you. Alright, so same thing as before. I just stapled the felt through the batting into the plywood, and I had a lot of felt because I can't do math very well, so I went all the way around my plywood. You don't have to do this, but I did. And it looks great, and it's amazing. And what I did was I put a little, with the extra felt I had, because I did have a little extra, I made 2 tabs on either side, and I stapled those in and um, as well, so that I could pull this layer out of the table if I ever needed to. So the next thing here is I put the felt layer into the table just to make sure that it would actually fit. And it did, and it looks amazing in that table. So once that was done, I went back to the hardware store and I got some more lumber for the toppers, and that'll make it look like a dining room table. I debated on whether to go with 1 by 16s or 1 by 20s or 1 by 10s or 1 by 12s. I ended up going with 1 by 12s. They're pretty cheap, and I only needed 5 of them. But 5 didn't get all the way across the table, so I did have to go back to the store, and I got a 1 by 5 that I had to cut down. I had to cut an inch off of it, and then it worked perfectly. So once I had everything for my table, then it was time to start sanding. Now, as you can tell, the top portion of this picture has been sanded. It looks very smooth and it's very white. And the lower half of the picture has not been sanded yet, and you can see the natural wood on it. So once I got done sanding everything, it should look like this. It should be pretty smooth and pretty white. What I did was I first sanded with 80 grit just to take a layer of wood off and, you know, get it down to the nitty gritty there. And then I went around again just very quickly with 220 grit. It's very fine and it makes the wood feel like glass. So that's good. And it yeah, looks pretty good there. So the next step after everything is sanded is to start with your staining process. Now I did use the pre-stain, and I put a coat of pre-stain on it, and then within that same day I did stain the table, and then I had to wait 8 hours to do the polyurethane. Like I said, I've never done this before, and so it was a little it was a lot of fun though. It was a lot of fun doing that. So let's see what happened. So what you can see here in this picture is that the lower half has been conditioned with the pre-stain, and the vertical board has not. That's still just the sanded board, just so you can see the difference. When you put the pre-stain on, it'll look kind of like water, like a little dirty water, but it'll help with the stain and it'll help smooth it out and make it look better. So I pre-stained it, and then I went on and I put a coat of stain on it. The longer you leave stain on wood, the darker it'll get. Go ahead and just apply your stain, a generous amount of stain, and then let it sit there for about 5 to 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, just take some paper towels and wipe it away. Wipe the excess away, and then you'll just have to let it sit there for 8 hours, and then you can go on to polyurethane. I didn't get a picture of polyurethane because it pretty much looked like this. the picture of the stain. So I didn't get a picture of it, but I did put 3 coats of polyurethane on the table, and 2 coats on the play area, because I knew that the table is going to get high usage out of it, so I wanted 3 coats. Um, and then after the 3 coats, I just let it sit for 24 hours. Then we brought it up to my friends came back over. We brought it up to my apartment, and we attached the legs, and everything was wonderful. There it is. There's my buddy. He's passed out from helping me move it up. But we got the legs on, and the cup holders in. The felt went in without a hitch. Everything looks good. Then we brought up the toppers because it for the dining room table, and we put those in, and everything fit wonderfully and looks beautiful. There it is from a different angle, and it's just amazing what stain can do to wood. There brings it brings it to life a little bit. I used 232 red chestnut stain, and it looks pretty good. Alright, so to remove the top boards, what I did is I drilled a hole right here on the outside of the board, just so I could put my finger in it, and I just put my finger in, pull up, lift up, out comes the first board, then you're able to lift off the next board. Alright, so now that the boards, my toppers, have been removed, you can now see that there is a felt layer underneath, and that's what you play on. As you saw in the video, what it takes to make this, or what I did to make it. So some of the features of the table, feature is it's got 5.5 inches here, so you can put all your cards up here, or your little pieces. If you don't want to put them on the board, you can always put them up here. It does have a layer of felt that is removable, and I'll show you that now. You just grab onto one of the tabs. I put a tab over there, and I have a tab right here of just some leftover felt that I had lying around, and you just grab it and pull up. And then underneath, you can put anything you want here. I left it wood, but you can definitely use carpet squares. You can use foam sheets. You can lay that out here. You can leave it wood. You can do anything you want. But I really like the felt, so I'm just going to leave my felt in. The cool thing about my table that I did is the people that supported me and helped me raise the funds for my table, I had them sign their names on the felt layer, so that way they always have a spot at this table when they come play.